Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. I wanted to come to you today with another tag. I'm way behind in tags, and I've got like several of them in the notebook that I thought would be good to do, and then I've been tagged in a few videos here of late, and so I got to play a little catch up. And so I'm going to do today the philosophy of reading book tag, and this was put together by Brandon at Brandon's Bookshelf, and I watched his video, and I also watched Steve Donahue's response to it as he did the video, and it was quite the little go between the as the two gave their answers, and it was quite funny. And anyway, I wanted to put my 2 cents in on this. It was a really good tag, really good questions that Brandon put together. And if you don't know Brandon, go check out his channel. He's got an excellent channel. It's been growing here of late, and I'm glad to see that people are subscribing. He puts out some really good content. He kind of, I believe philosophy is his the genre that he likes the best. Now, I don't really read philosophy. It's never really taken hold with me, but I do appreciate people who read different genres, and that's all right. And so anyway, like I said, I wanted to put my 2 cents in, so I better get started because there are 20 questions to this tag, so I'll try to keep them as short as possible. So number one, what's most important, a good character, plot, or message? Now, I've had this question in previous tags. It's a good question that really makes you think. And I know in the earlier tags, I actually gave an answer one way or the other. I want to say I said a good character, but as I thought about this yesterday, I got to thinking, all three of them I think are equally important, and an author needs to be able to play on all three because you can have two of the three, but if the author messes up on the third one, it can ruin an entire book. And so I think for my answer, I'm not gonna go one way or the other with my answer. I'm going to say all three are equally important because, like I said, one bad apple can spoil the bunch, and that really is I think the how books are, because I've read fiction books where I've had really good characters, but the plot fell through, and then I didn't like the book, or I had a good plot and there was some characters that just weren't well done and didn't like the book. So I think it's a combination of all three of those. So number two, and if you're wondering why I'm looking down, I got all my stuff on a piece of paper here, so kind of bear with me with that. Number two, should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? Absolutely. I don't think you can become very informed if you don't know the other person's argument, if you don't understand it. You cannot have a good discussion without knowing how to respond to different things that the other side likes. And I don't care if this is just like historically in an event, if it's politically what's going on. I think you need to be a well-rounded reader and know both sides of an argument. And so you will tend to find, for me, like, I love Civil War, everybody knows that. I'm a Union man. I am so with the Union, it's not even funny, but I do buy some stuff on the Confederacy because I want to see both sides of the story. I try to understand it. I haven't come to a full understanding of that yet, but you try to see the other side, not that you can make it right, but just to come up with good arguments to counteract it. You got to be able to see both sides of an argument, and you can definitely look at that in politics, which is what I try to teach my kids. Every political cycle, we watch the debates, and then we go check out all the candidates' websites that were in that debate. And I just think that's very, very important. I remember one time where a while back, one of my colleagues, I had bought a biography on somebody from the opposing party that I follow. It was the opposite party of what I am, and I had one of my fellow teachers who was pretty strong in the same direction as me. He asked, "What in the world are you reading that for? Why are you reading that trash?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, it's not trash, and second of all, how do I argue the other side's uh, opinions on stuff if I don't see their side of the argument? You got to be able to see both sides." So I think that's really important to look at both sides. Number 3, as tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? Now, I believe the role of books are always going to be here because I think it is a definite standard for how you get your ideas out to the public. But how those books get out to the public, that may change as technology changes. Obviously, there are a lot of people that read ebooks, and they put them on their Kindles. They put them on their. I don't know all the devices because I'm, as you can see, a book man. But I think that books will be there, whether it's in paper form or on the phone or on a Kindle or whatever. I think they're always going to be there in one way or another. Now, I do see how tech has opened up avenues to other forms of reading. So magazines have went away a little bit. Most libraries, or a lot of libraries, aren't even carrying them anymore because everything's went digital. And so I see a lot of people who, as magazines go under, I see a lot of people who read websites and blogs and all that kind of stuff. So I think that stuff, as far as reading, that stuff's going to stay around just as long, but I don't think books are going anywhere. It might be a different way of selling the book, but I think books are here. Number 4, how important are summaries, review, and art in your book choosing? Okay, so for me, the summary at the back of the book definitely helps me. I don't go out to a lot of journals and read. A lot of people read journals and stuff and look for the newest books coming out. I use the back covers and the inside cover, the flap of the book, to determine if it's something I possibly could like. Now, those could play a role because they can strike an interest. I love the artwork. That can just strike my eye and I can, oh, that sounds cool. Or even the title of a book. That sounds really cool. I think I'll, pick that up, just give it a try. Now, book reviews, I don't do a whole lot of, going out and reading book reviews, basically because I want to make my own opinion of the book. And I have tendency to, when I read a review, I tend to go with that review, and I want to make my own opinion, formulate my own opinion in my brain. So I don't read a whole lot of them. So number 5, should one ever skim or scan a book? Okay, so I guess I got to start this with, what type of book are you reading? Because there is a time and a place for skimming and scanning. So I teach my kids, when they're working on, questions for a worksheet at school or something like that, or you're looking for information to how to, how to fix your carburetor. Well, you're going to need to skim and scan a textbook or a operator's manual, which are both types of books. You're going to have to be able to skim and scan those because you don't want to be, you don't want to be reading about how to change a tire when what you need is how to change or how to fix the carburetor, that kind of stuff. So there is a time and a place, and I like to teach my kids that at school. The problem is the kids at school like to try to take skim and scan and apply it to a fiction book that they have to read for English class. And that is not a time to skim and scan, in my opinion. I think that you need to read the whole book. And I know Steve Donahue went on a fairly large tangent about skimming and scanning and how, you have people on BookTube, BroTube, who say they read 1,000 books in a year. And that's just a big load of crap because skimming and scanning that's not reading. That's searching is what that is. That's not reading. And if you have skimmed and scanned a book, you haven't read the book. You haven't got the message. You got to read the book to get the message. And only reading the last couple pages is not going to get you that message. That drives me nuts. But so I really agree with Steve Donahue on that part. But as I said, there is a time and a place for skimming and scanning if you're using it at the right time in the right situation. So, and by the way, if you've skimmed and scanned a book, that should not go on your I have read this book for, your list for the year of books you've read. That should not go on there because you didn't read it. I would not say I read a textbook, even though I got 4 different textbooks. No, 5 or 6 different textbooks that I'm using at school for various things. I don't say that I read them at the end of the year because I've skimmed and scanned for different pieces of information. So anyway, number 6, should reading always be enjoyable? Again, this kind of depends. I think if you're reading for your own home library, for the most part, it should be enjoyable. Or why are you spending the money on that book? Why are you reading it if you're not enjoying it? Now, there are times when you get assigned readings and you might not enjoy it, but you got to do it for part of your job. I know that there's been times in the past where we had a book study at school. Now, luckily, I have enjoyed most of them, but I'm guessing there were people who did not enjoy the book study, but we had to read it. So there are times where you got to read something that you might not enjoy. But I would say for your home library, why are you buying the book if you're not enjoying it? Yeah. Anyway, is it important to be well read? I would say it definitely helps. And when you say well read, there's different ways of looking at well read. So for like me, you've got fiction, you've got nonfiction, and within fiction, you've got mystery, you've got romance, you've got drama, you've got all these different subheadings under fiction, and then nonfiction, you can do the exact same thing. It depends on what you mean by well read. Do you mean that you've read every one of those genres, subgenres? I don't do that. But within the genre that I am the most comfortable in, I feel that I am fairly well read. I know there's others out there that have read more than me, but like within the Civil War genre, I've read quite a bit on the Civil War. I could give quite a few recommendations. I have quite a few more that I want to read, but I think that if you're defining well read within your genre that you're comfortable, yes, I'm well read. If you're meaning clear across the board of all genres, probably not. I am not well read when it comes to that type of definition. Number 8, what is your book buying process? All right, so mainly for me, as you all know, I'm a teacher. I don't make a ton of money. I don't have a lot of money on the side that I can use for buying books. So I have to be, kind of picky and choosy. And I do a lot of book hauls, but you have to understand that I spend $5, $6, $7 during my book haul. Some of them get up to 15, but I don't buy brand new books that cost, $35. So like I found this book here last night at the when we took my daughter to the library. The Friends of the Library have a book cart that sits in the entrance, and you can go through there, and any book you find on there you can buy for $1. And I bought this brand new James Madison, A Life Reconsidered by Lynn Cheney. I bought that for $1. And if I was to buy that brand new, that would be a $36 book here in the United States, $42 in Canada. I can't spend $36 on a brand new book, especially when I know if I just wait a little bit, I'll find it on a cart for $1, $2, something like that. And so for me, my book buying process, it includes a lot of used books. Most of my books are used books that I find at my favorite stores like Books Revisited. I like to go to the Jesse James Outlet Mall. I like to go to the Goodwill and, places like that. The Dollar Tree, I sometimes find, last time was terrible when I looked for books, but sometimes you can find some gems there. But most of the time, the vast majority of the time when I buy books, it's used books. I occasionally go to Barnes & Noble. It's not very often. It's just a couple times a year, and I might pick up one brand new book. But even then, it's one of the $18 books, not one of the $36 books. And I like to buy off the bargain rack when I go there, if possible. Also, a part of my book buying process is when I have my nonfiction books and I'm looking for other titles, I go to the back of the book and I go to the bibliography. You know, what did this author use to write this book? And from here, you can get from page 517 all the way to page 535. So what is that? 27, what was that, 18 pages or so? Hopefully my math was on there, or close enough anyway. So about 18 pages of different book titles that I could buy that deal with, James Madison and his lifetime. So when I go to do my book buying, if I'm buying on like Amazon, I have a lot of those lists put together, and I can go and kind of selectively look for different titles to put into the Amazon search engine. Or when I'm out and about at the used bookstore, I've got, I've wrote these things down so many times, I kind of have them in my brain, and I know when I see a title whether to grab it or not. So that's kind of my book buying process. Number 9, what's your reading process? Okay, so depends on if it's fiction or nonfiction. When I'm doing fiction, that is, strictly with fiction, it is strictly mood reading. What am I in the mood to read? Is it a mystery? Is it a legal thriller? Is it a historical fiction? It's what I feel like. I don't really have a process other than, like last night when we were at the library, I picked up a Christmas story for December about the Civil War. And I'm real excited. And actually, that might be a nonfiction book, but it looks like it's going to read like a fiction. And so it's what I'm in the mood to read. I know I'm going to read Skipping Christmas by John Grisham for Christmas. I always like that. It's a good, feel-good story and makes me laugh and everything else. So I try to read it every December. So that's my fiction reading process. My nonfiction reading process is typically all built around what we are covering in my classes at school. So like my 7th grade is hitting World War II. And so a week ago, I read a book on D-Day by Alex Kershaw. And I try to read these books at the same time that I'm covering stuff in class, because it just refreshes my memory. It gives me, just new stories that I can put into the lecture, new material to go look up for the kid, and have the kids go research. I also base my reading process has also been based around my buddy reads. What are my fellow booktubers reading? So like I had mentioned that the book 1914, and Peg and I had an exchange in Voxer, and Peg says, "Hey, I would really enjoy going through the World War I scene with you. Do you want to read that as a buddy read here this next year?" And I was super excited. I said, "Sure." And so I like to be in that community of buddy readers. And so that's a part of my reading process. When I get up in the mornings, I read for an hour to 2 hours, depending on how early I get up before I go to school. And I read over there by the lamp in my big chair where I did my last video. And I have a stack of books there that I'm always working on. And so that has become a part of my reading process. And I take notes as I go. And that way, like if I'm having a Voxer group, I can have my notes to refer back to when I leave messages for the others. And then I have those notes when I go back to school and I teach that. So anyway, that is my reading process. So number 10, how do you use what you read? And so I kind of just gave the answer. I take my information that I read, and not only is it just for my enjoyment in my head, it is for my kids at school. I definitely pass on my knowledge to them. I want to make them lifelong learners. That is my ultimate goal. And so I like to pull these stories that I find to be, some are more interesting than the others. And those are the ones that spark the kids' interests. And so I love to do that a lot because I want to create those lifelong learners. So that's how I use what I read. And then I use it for my buddy reads, for the discussion. Number 11, if you could download a book to your brain, would you still read it? Yeah. You guys do realize when you download something, it doesn't do you any good if you don't read it. I have downloaded stuff onto my iBooks on my Mac, and I haven't read it. Just because you download it doesn't mean anything. You actually still have to read that. You still have to compute that somehow. So, and maybe I'm just looking at this the wrong way. I think it would be silly to download stuff and you don't read it. You still got to read it. So anyway, number 12. What are your views on rereading a book? I have no problem with it. I do it all the time. It's kind of like I always view, and when this question comes up in other tags, the way that I answer this is I always view books, especially fiction, I always view that like a good TV show or an old movie that you play over and over again. Well, if you can play an old movie over and over again, it's because you like it. You like the story. You want to enjoy that and have that same experience. Books are the same way. I always tell my kids, when you're reading, you should be playing a movie in your head. Put actors to those movies. Put voices to those or to that book. And if you enjoy that process, if you're visualizing all of that, you should enjoy it. And if you want to have that same enjoyment because you enjoyed the story, reread. There is nothing wrong with rereading a book. You're still reading, still enjoying. Number 13, what makes a good book? Does it entertain me? There are lots of things or lots of different ways that I get entertained when I read. Fiction, is it just a good story? Do you have those, like we said up above, those good characters, that good plot, that good message? In history, is it something that interests me? Is it something that, just gets my mind wondering, well, what if, or why did that happen? Or, connecting dots in history. So, there are a lot of things that make a good book, and it starts with the author. How did they tell that story? How do they get that across to the audience? Because you can be the best or the most knowledgeable person, and I'm thinking like my American history stuff. You can be the most knowledgeable person in your area, but if you can't tell a good story, who cares? Nobody's going to read it. It's going to be boring, and they're not going to get past the first chapter. So a good book starts with a good author. The author has to be able to get the message across. What makes a bad book? What makes a book bad? Again, we go back up to that very first question. If you've got bad characters, a bad plot, or a bad message. So it starts with the author. A book can go bad because of your author, bad writing. When I'm reading fiction, I don't like slow-paced books. Now, nonfiction, that just kind of comes with the territory. Sometimes they are slower paced, and they're almost always slower paced than a fiction book. But if you get a fiction book that is slow paced, I struggle with that. Don't tell me a slow, boring story. Tell me something that's got, that'll pick up the pace. And I do understand that within the book, there's different pacing within the book. I get that. But overall, that story's got to keep moving. Don't get me stalled, because that's when I put a book down and I don't come back to it for 4 or 5 years. Number 15, how do you feel about not finishing a book? Now, that kind of piggybacks on that last part I just said. It bothers me when I don't finish a book. And so I usually do finish a book. Sometimes with some books, there's 3 or 4 year break in between, the first part of a book and the second half of the book. Sometimes that happens. So not finishing a book really, really bugs me, because I'm always wondering, am I missing something? Am I missing out on something? And a lot of times the reason I don't finish a book in one reading is because something in life comes up. I'm thinking teaching wise, coaching wise, life gets real busy. Like for me during the spring, when I've got school and we've got end of the year activities, we've got track, we've got baseball, we've got it all going at the same time. And sometimes there is very few minutes to read in the day. And, so I end up putting books down sometimes because of that. But it does bug me. Number 16, should the author's personal life matter at all? To me, I don't think so. It's the writing. Are they a good writer? And fortunately for me, I do not go research authors, so I don't even know what's wrong with them, if there's anything wrong with them. If they've done something I typically don't know unless people on BookTube have started talking about stuff. So like J.K. Rowling, everybody started talking about, and I don't even remember what it was. That tells you how much I pay attention to that kind of stuff. But a lot of people quit reading Harry Potter books because of what that was said. Well, you had millions of readers reading it before, so the story must be good. The story must be okay. What she said, it was something she said. Like I said, I don't remember what she said, but that doesn't affect the book. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm really even answering this question. For me, personal life doesn't matter because I don't pay attention to it. I pay attention to the book. If you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? For me, it'd be nonfiction, American history. Subcategory of American history. Hands down. That's what the majority, if you look around at all the titles, that's what definitely the majority of my books are, is American history. It's what I love. It's mainly what I read. So if I could only read one genre, it would be nonfiction, American history. Number 18, do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? Yeah, sometimes. Most of the time I have an idea of what the book is about, but there are those occasions when I'm going through the used bookstore and I see a cover that kind of stands out to me and just, oh, that looks kind of cool. I'll give it a try, or a title, if it was a good title to a book. So every once in a while, yes, that does happen. And sometimes I even pick them up because they were cheap. If you can get something for $0.25 for free, yeah, give it a try. It was free. What's the worst thing that could happen? I'm out $0 or out 25 cents. I can afford that. Number 19. So almost done here. 2 more questions. Number 19. What author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into, and why? For me, there are 2. Self-help books, and I've said this many times. I do not like self-help books. Self-help books, they think that the message, a lot of times they think the message can apply to everybody when it doesn't. It applies to a subcategory of people. And I think a lot of times self-help books are a big load of bull. I do not like self-help books. They are some of the most boring books to me. I really, really struggle to get through them. And then the other one is, and I'm really, really sorry, Brandon, but philosophy. Philosophy bugs me. More probably because it goes over my head. So that's on me. I don't read philosophy. I had to read some during my master's classes, but on my own free time, I don't read philosophy. Now, that doesn't mean philosophy is terribly bad. It's just not my cup of tea. I respect philosophy. I do not respect self-help books, but I do respect philosophy. It's just not my cup of tea. And then number 20. Do you think everyone should read? Why? To me, yes. I'm a teacher. I'm gonna obviously say yes. Yes, reading is just, it is so very important. It is the backbone to all learning. Because there's different types of reading. You can read, a fiction book, nonfiction book. There's reading textbooks and manuals. There's reading in math. When you do math, that's reading. And so I think that reading is extremely important because it's the foundation to all of our learning in one way or another. So let's see. When it comes to reading, like just regular books, what we call normal books, I'm not saying you have to read 100 books in a year, but I do think that it is very important to work the brain and get a few books, at least a couple books in within the year. I'm not saying everybody has to read as much as me or as much as, Peg or Steve or Mark or, any of the, I'm thinking of the people I follow very, very regularly on BookTube. I'm not saying you have to read as much as we do, but I do think it's important to keep your mind active. That is part of being a lifelong learner. And so like my goal in the classroom is with my kids, I get to know my kids. I try to build a really good relationship with them so I can get to know them and they feel really comfortable with me. Then when I start to see what sparks their different interests and what their different interests are, I can start recommending books to them. And a lot of times what we do is we create lifelong learners, and then, 3 years after, they're juniors or seniors in high school, they're coming back and saying, "Hey, Mr. Ruttenberg, did you read the newest John Grisham book? Or, hey, Mr. Ruttenberg, did you read this new book on Lincoln? It's awesome. If you haven't, why don't you read it? And then, sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't read those books, and I can have that conversation with them. And then I am definitely seeing that we have built that lifelong learner, or at least that lifelong enjoyment of reading a good story. And so I think reading is extremely important. And it can be, one other thing I want to add to that, it doesn't have to just be books. My wife, she reads a lot. It's just not in books. She reads a lot of magazines. She reads a ton of articles online. So reading comes in different ways. So I just think that we have to push reading, because it's always going to be here. It's how we get our messages across in, whether it's in a book or it's an article online. There's always a message getting across. It's how we spread our culture, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I do think everyone should read. So thank you, BookTube. I know this video is little over a half hour now. So if you've stuck with me this long, I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. I invite everybody to do this. This is a great tag, and it's not real hard to do. It's a lot of really good questions that make you think just a little bit. And so I invite everybody to do this. Go share in Brandon's fun. I know he's been wanting to see how many people he could get to do his tag. So I'm hoping I have given it a little bit of life. I don't know if I gave any opinions that are a ton, way different than everybody else's, but I hope I added to the conversation. So thank you, Brandon, for creating this. And I'll leave the links to Brandon's and Steve's videos down below in the description. So BookTube, until next time, I just hope you have a great day. I hope the weather's good for you. Hope you get some reading in. And so happy reading.